Hello and welcome to the Monday, October 20th, 2025 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, recording today from Jacksonville, Florida. And this episode is brought to you by the SANS.edu Graduate Certificate Program in Cybersecurity Engineering. TikTok apparently has learned from ClickFix. Xavier came across a TikTok video that advertised ways to get Photoshop for free. But of course, instead of getting free versions of expensive software, you're actually stuck with malware. The technique used here is very similar to what's commonly used as ClickFix, where you're being prompted with a CAPTCHA, and then you have to essentially copy-paste PowerShell code into your PowerShell window on your Windows machine. Well, here the difference is only that it's done via TikTok. So the TikTok video basically tells you how to copy or how to type the PowerShell script into your PowerShell window. That, of course, you're first being instructed to start as an administrator. And then, well, the malicious code is executed. In this code, additional malware is being downloaded that will then essentially download info stealers or whatever the attacker would like to load on your system. Good news is that Virus Total promises a good recognition rate for at least this particular version of this scam, but there are hundreds literally out there that do similar things that, again, promise free software, but then trick you into actually executing this PowerShell code. And it's not always that obvious really what you're executing here, because they're kind of doing the Windows equivalent of just downloading some code and then piping it to a shell. So it's not that you're actually typing the code here into your PowerShell window. You're really just using PowerShell to download a file from a website and then executing it, which is a little bit more stealthy. And maybe people think it's, even if they understand kind of what that PowerShell does, that they think, hey, I'm just downloading some free software or some patch for the software to make it free. And that's maybe why this particular trick is still successful. And then talking about victims being tricked into executing malicious code, well, we do have another case where actually Google Ads are being used to advertise tools that in particular popular with developers, and here somewhat focusing on macOS, like Homebrew. Homebrew is this package manager, allows you to install a lot of open source packages on macOS. I use it, very popular, particularly with developers for installing additional tools, little command line utilities and such, Git extensions and things like that. So definitely one of the target groups here are developers. And yes, they're then ending up again with info stealers. And that's what Hunt.io here discovered as part of their blog post. Researchers at the University of California at San Diego, as well as the University of Maryland, have demonstrated that it's relatively easy to not only eavesdrop on signals being sent to and from satellites, but also that much of that traffic is unencrypted. The information sort of was presented at a recent conference, and the paper has now been made public. You may have seen some news reports about it about a week ago, but now we have the actual paper available and also no more paywall for the actual information in the paper. The lesson here really is something that's not really that new. As soon as the network traffic leaves the network jack on your system, it does enter hostile territory. So you better make sure that you properly authenticate, that you are properly encrypting your traffic, and that you make sure that the traffic is not being altered in transit. And well, your two main mechanisms for doing this is, of course, TLS. That's usually the simplest way and the most common way how this is done, or via one of the many VPN options that you have available. There are some cases where you don't really have a choice, and the one example here that they point out is good old phone calls, which are often also not encrypted, but basically the satellite traffic itself does not offer any encryption. So you rely on whatever traffic is being sent to be already being encrypted before it's being passed to the satellite network. Of course, this also depends on the particular technology being used by the satellite. This here is sort of a more traditional telecommunication satellite, which really is just a relay of traffic. It doesn't really sort of alter the traffic like encryption or anything like that. That's not really the point of a satellite like this. More modern satellites like Starlink and similar constellations, they are actually encrypting traffic, of course, in part also to protect the network against rogue access and making sure everybody has a proper account that accesses the network. Well, that's it for today. Remember, on Saturday, I'll be speaking at B-Sides Augusta, so hope to see some listeners there in person. Otherwise, thanks for liking and subscribing to this podcast, and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.